What is up, guys? We are headed into the holidays, and today we are talking about scheduling and managing your time well before we hit the holidays. Something I'm really passionate about and has been super helpful for me in the past few years as I have merged the idea of running a business that is related to me and then also trying to have a personal life. And for me, at least, getting married was one of those things where it was a good check of like, what do I need to prioritize and spend my time on? And just how can I have a more fulfilling life using the time that I already have? And I just thought that was really appropriate as we head towards the end of the year, as we head towards holidays, when everybody wants to rest and sleep. And I think there is an opportunity for you as a freelancer, as somebody who's listening to this, as somebody who has a passion about something and you want to do more with it. Whether you're already full-time and you want to build the next thing, or you're working a 9-to-5 and you have dreams of being a photographer, calligrapher, something like that. And this is really important to me, as I think no matter what you're doing, even if you are a full-time employee, have no plans to go full-time freelance or anything like that, scheduling and managing your time well is super cool. And so I wanted to just hop on here, do a tiny episode. Hopefully it's tiny. We'll see how passionate we get. And just give you a few tips, tricks, reminders, things that I've learned, things that other friends have learned, and just really give those to you. So we're going to dive right in. So one of the favorite facts about managing your time that I've learned is how much time do we have? And the reality is, if you add it all up and you say, okay, well, I have 7 days, right, in a week, and 7 times 24 is 168. 168 hours a week is the amount of time that we have. And the coolest thing about that is that we have the same amount of time, guys, as Beyonce and U2 and the president and these people that you would seem have a lot of time, or they maybe they don't have a lot of time. And we have that same amount of time. And obviously, everybody feels busy. Often people feel overwhelmed. But whenever I feel a little bit crazy, or I get messages that are like, oh, where do you find the time to do this podcast in addition to running Mason Photography? And I just say, time isn't lost or found. It's made. And now, granted, that's not like scientifically accurate. I can't make time. I would make a lot more money than doing a free podcast for creatives. So yeah, it's one of those things, though, that I've been passionate about. When I tell people my time is made, we all have the same amount of it, and how we spend it is up to us. If you're able to listen to this episode, you're able to determine how you use your time. Everything is in your control when it comes to your time and how you react to how your time is being used. When it comes to the time, you say, Adam, how do we have 168 hours? All right, so let me just flesh it out for you. Let's say you have 8 hours of work, 5 days a week, right? So 40 hours, normal 9 to 5, 3 to 11, whatever you do. Let's say it takes you an hour to get there and back, an hour on both sides, which is abnormal for most of you listening to this, because I know where a lot of you live, and that sounds really creepy. I just know like where you listen at. I don't know where you live. That would be really terrifying. But let's say you have an hour to get there, an hour to get back. So we've got 10 hours, 5 days a week. Does that make sense? All right. And let's hope you get 8 hours of sleep. All right. So 5 days a week, you're spending 18 hours between working, sleeping, and getting to your job. All right, so that doesn't feel like that much. But if you look at it, you do have 6 extra hours, 24 minus 18, 6 extra hours, just those 5 days. And maybe you're using that to get ready for bed or getting ready for work. And you've got extracurriculars, etc. But that's still 6 hours, just those 5 days. And then in addition, you've got your 2 weekend days. And granny's like, Adam, I don't have a weekend, or I help out at church, or my husband does this thing, or whatever. Again, you're in charge of your time, and everybody around you as well. If they're over 18 and have cognition, they are also in charge of their time. We have the same 168 hours a week. But if you say, Adam, all right, so we have 168 hours, how much time do I have left if, we just have count those 6 hours a night and the 2 spare days? You have an additional 62 hours. What in the world? 168 hours a week minus about 106 hours that we cut from our working and getting there and our sleeping. Just like, how in the world do we have 62 additional hours? Like, everybody should have a side hustle. Like, rocket scientists should also be doing baking shows or something. Like, 62 hours. If I had an additional 62 hours, I would be super happy. And even saying that to myself, it's like, Adam, there are some things that you could be doing where you could get that time back, if you will. You know, again, it's all about how you spend it. So the next thing about time is just how do you spend it? And so the first little tip is I would say track it. Try to track it. Whether you're a spreadsheet person, an envelope person, use it as if it was money and track it and know where you're spending. Instead of Netflix, groceries, or bills, it is Netflix and sleeping and work and passion, etc. But treat it like money. Again, like, what are you doing with your other time? So you have to like sleep, work. If you have another passion, or you're getting ready, any extracurriculars, whether you're on the dodgeball team at church, or you're playing kickball, or you go to the bar, or whatever. Netflix, Facebook, and Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Marco Polo, and all of the little apps that also take up our time. And you need to track how you're spending your time. One of my good friends, Ashley Garrity, who's not been on the podcast yet, but we're trying to get her on. Hopefully she listens to this and says, Ashley, let's do this. She's always a big fan of tracking because you got to know how you spend your time. Because the reality is that how you're spending your time is, one, hopefully factual, but two, you're going to interpret it in an emotional way. And that's going to distort the actuality of what's happening. So you might say, Adam, I don't have any time, but like, we know when you stop at Starbucks on the way home, that's an additional 20 minutes, or you stop here and you do this, or it takes you like, one of my least favorite habits that I do is there are certain mornings, if I leave my phone in the house or like in my room where I sleep, I will check my phone when I wake up. And that's just terrible. Nobody needs me immediately in the morning, especially on days that aren't work days. But the reality is that I want to check it to get the dopamine hit and feel like, I'm important and that people want me. And the reality is, most people probably don't want us at that early in the morning. And if they do, they're the person, part of our family, like our wives or our kids or et cetera. And so track your time. So I would say if you're using an iPhone or an Android device, one of my favorite apps is called Moment, which is really, really cool. And that's great for tracking times. And it'll do like the individual apps that you use and what days. If you're on an iPhone, there is an app called Screen Time. And it's built into the system, and it's so good. And you can add all your devices. So you can have like your iPad and your iPhone time together. You can separate them. It is so, so good. And it'll tell you like how many apps you used, what battery percentage did they use, like when do you use them, how many hours a week or a day did you average? And the data is fascinating. If you need a reference point, I use my phone about 5 hours a day total, which is terrifying. It also tells you how many times you picked up the phone. And that number for me is, I do not like seeing that number at all. It is really terrible. So I'm trying to get off my phone, at least for pointlessness, because what I'll tell you is, 5 hours a day on average, that's 30 hours a week, 35 hours a week that I'm using my phone. And some of that is for work, but not all of that. And I'm sure that's the same case for you. Now, on the computer, I can only speak for the Mac. I'm not sure what they have for Windows because I'm just out of that world. But on the Mac world, my favorite app that I actually use is called Timing. And so you kind of put your apps into the apps you use into like different folders. So like for Lightroom, I have that under Mason Photography. And so anytime I use Lightroom, it counts that as Mason Photography time. And then say I'm using it also will track like the website. So if I go to Netflix, it'll count that as personal, and you can kind of organize that however you want. It's also kind of like project tracking too, which is really, really good. So if I'm working on something for the podcast, it'll still be work, but it won't be counted under Mason Photography. It'll be counted under the Bearded Tog. And so that app is called Timing. It is a paid app, but it is really, really good and really granular. And you can see all these kind of graphs and progress reports. And as a business, like $50 is worth getting your time back and knowing where you're spending your time because it's so good. It also becomes kind of like a game, like, oh, I don't want to spend 10 hours on Facebook this week or whatever. The other app that is really, really good, but it's not as well designed or pretty, and I like pretty apps, is called Rescue Time. Rescue Time is really, really good, and it'll give you like a progress report at the end of the week. So that is really good, both Timing and Rescue Time for Mac. And I will link those in the show notes, of course, for you guys at adammason.com/podcast. And lastly, without going too long, so we talked about how much time do we have, how much time do we spend, and here are just some little tiny tips for like getting back time without having to take on that 62 hours we talked about, but even just little tiny things that I've learned in my life. And so I love having extra time to work, but at the same time, you also, part of your managing your time is knowing when to take your own time and have a day off and go to a movie or take away the phone and read the book or whatever. I say you need to eliminate the things that distract you or keep you from wasting time. So, it's kind of the principle of like, if you have apples in a jar, not in a jar, and apples in a bowl outside in your kitchen, like you'll eat more apples, but if you like hide them, you'll never go look for them. So eliminate those things that take your time away. Like I don't have like an Xbox or something on my desk because that would be terrible, because every time I came to work, I would want to play the game rather than actually do work. So does that make sense? That's kind of an extreme example. So some little tiny things, like I said, is like no phone in the bedroom. I don't use it at night. Don't use it in the morning. That's ideal. That doesn't happen all the time, and it does take some like getting used to. So like I use my watch as my alarm, but it's on Do Not Disturb. You could have a real alarm clock and use that as well. And the idea is just to not have the phone in the bedroom. One, you'll sleep better scientifically, but then two, it's just a better habit for you to not waste time. The other thing too that I really love is just writing down like 2 or 3 big goals for the next day the night before. So whether you're a full-time freelancer or have a full-time job or something like that, is, hey, I want to do the laundry, I want to cut the grass, and I want to do the dishes, or I want to work on that project, I want to export a wedding, etc. Just write those down. These are things that you need to do. These are like the things that will push the needle forward for your personal life or your business. One of those might be even working out, but just 3 big things that you're like, all right, this is what I need to do. And most of the time, those are never email. That is like seldom is an email pushing the needle forward. Just letting you know that. It's just don't check email immediately. I always say like, I check it at lunchtime, check it in the afternoon, and then I'm done. Like don't touch it. Email's not good. I'm ranting. So those are the things that I would kind of give as my little tiny tips for scheduling and managing your time well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If there's anything that you want to add or have questions about or some of the apps, feel free to email me, thebeardedtog@gmail.com. We'll see you around on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for listening. One very special word of note: if you would like to support the podcast, or, people always DM me and they're like, hey, if you're ever in my town, I'll buy you a beer or something like that. And I don't drink, for the record, so I'm really cheap. You can just buy me like a Diet Coke or a chocolate milk. But I would highly suggest joining the Patreon. Patreon is where we are dropping little nuggets of wisdom that are going to change your business forever. So like I just uploaded a full gallery versus the blog. You can kind of see what goes on the blog and what goes on the full gallery, just to see the insights and kind of the under the hood of Mason Photography and other photographers' businesses. So you can go there at patreon.com/thebeardedtog, or the link is in the show notes. The other way, if you want a more hands-on approach, is through mentor sessions. We have fully launched mentor sessions this year, and they are absolutely incredible. Most of my mentees are good friends now, and we talk about everything, and we get to vent about situations in our industry. And I really take ownership in trying to help them succeed as much as possible and really just carve out the life that they want to do. So we're really excited about that. You can find all of that at adammason.com/education. And yeah, guys, lastly, the free thing you can do to support the podcast is not buy us a beer. That's not free. The last thing is give us a 5-star review on iTunes. I would love to know what you think. Please, please, please go leave a 5-star review and say a few words. If it's not 5 stars, don't leave it at all. If you don't have something nice to say that's 5 stars, don't say it at all, as Mom always said. So thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season if you're diving into the Thanksgiving this weekend, and keep being awesome. Thank you so much, guys.